Isolde didn't know that the man she'd been secretly meeting in the palace gardens for the past 3 weeks was about to destroy every careful wall she'd built. She didn't know that tonight, in front of every noble house in the realm, he would make a choice that neither of them could take back. She only knew that she needed to disappear. The grand hall blazed with 1,000 candles, their light catching the gold thread woven through tapestries older than the kingdom itself. Crystal chandeliers threw rainbows across marble floors polished to a mirror shine, and the scent of winter roses and expensive perfume hung heavy in the air. Isolde pressed herself against a pillar, her servant's uniform suddenly feeling like a target painted across her chest. The fabric was simple, gray, designed to make her invisible among the glittering gowns and polished armor of the nobility. She'd spent her whole life being invisible. It had kept her safe, kept her surviving, and now, when it mattered most, she needed that invisibility like she needed air. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she watched him enter. Damien, the Alpha King. 6.5 feet of barely contained power wrapped in ceremonial black and silver. A crown of twisted iron rested against the dark hair that she knew felt like silk between her fingers, and his shoulders filled the doorway with the kind of presence that made the entire room hold its breath. She shouldn't know how that hair felt. Shouldn't know how his voice dropped to a rough whisper when he said her name, or how his hands trembled slightly when they cupped her face, or how his eyes, gray as a winter storm, softened into something devastating when he looked at her. But she did. She knew because of 3 weeks of stolen moments. 3 weeks of meeting in the rose garden after midnight, when the guards changed shifts and the palace slept. 3 weeks of conversations that started casual and became confessions, of laughter that turned to longing, of a single kiss 3 nights ago that had shattered every rule she'd ever made for herself. And now, watching him stride through the parting crowd like the sea bowing before a god, she understood exactly how much danger she was in. His gaze swept the hall, searching. Isolde's stomach dropped. She ducked behind a passing group of courtiers, her pulse thundering in her ears. The ladies barely noticed her, too absorbed in their own whispered gossip about which noble daughter the king might finally choose as his queen. If only they knew. She couldn't be here, couldn't be seen. The consequences of their stolen moments, their whispered conversations, their devastating kiss in the moonlight, they would be catastrophic. For her. He was the Alpha King, untouchable, eternal. The ruler of 5 territories and commander of the largest army the realm had ever known. His bloodline stretched back to the gods themselves, or so the priests claimed. She was nobody, a kitchen servant's daughter who'd been elevated to handmaiden status only because Lady Morwen needed someone plain enough not to overshadow her at court functions. Someone forgettable, someone disposable. And if anyone discovered what had been growing between them in the shadowed corners of the rose garden, Isolde didn't want to think about what would happen. The whispers would start first, poison spreading through the court like rot through fruit. Then the accusations, the examinations of every moment of her life, searching for evidence that she'd seduced him, manipulated him, used some common girl's tricks to trap a king. She'd seen what happened to women who caught the attention of powerful men, seen them used up and discarded, their reputations shredded, their futures destroyed. Lord Carveth's last mistress had been found floating in the river, and everyone had called it an accident. She would not become another cautionary tale. The crowd shifted, and suddenly there was nowhere to hide. Isolde found herself standing at the edge of the dance floor, exposed, vulnerable, her gray dress a dull smudge among the jewel tones surrounding her. Ruby red, sapphire blue, emerald green. And her, in servant's gray, as out of place as a sparrow among peacocks. And Damien's eyes found her instantly. Something electric crackled through the bond that had been forming between them, that invisible thread she could almost see sometimes when the light was right. It pulled taut, humming with recognition, and she felt it in her chest like a second heartbeat. No, 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 no. Isolde spun away, pushing through bodies that barely registered her existence. She needed to reach the servants' corridor, just 30 feet. Maybe 20. She could make it. Could disappear into the maze of back passages and narrow stairs that the nobility never saw. Could pretend this night had never happened. A hand closed around her wrist. The touch burned through her skin like a brand, familiar and devastating. She knew those calluses, earned from sword work and climbing and all the physical pursuits a king wasn't supposed to indulge in. She knew the strength in that grip, tempered always with careful gentleness. She knew the way his thumb found her pulse point automatically, like he needed to feel her heartbeat to believe she was real. Damien. Don't. Her voice came out broken. She didn't turn around. Couldn't. If she looked at him now, in front of all these people, she would crumble. Please. Isolde. Her name in his voice was a prayer and a command all at once, low enough that only she could hear. Look at me. She squeezed her eyes shut. I can't be seen with you. Around them, conversations were faltering. She could feel the attention of the court pressing against her like a physical weight, curious and hungry and sharp. Predatory. These people survived on scandal, thrived on the destruction of others. The whole hall is watching, Damien said quietly, his breath warm against her hair. They've been watching since I walked in. They always watch. Then let me go. Her voice came out strangled. Before they realize, before anyone realizes what? His thumb traced a circle against her racing pulse, achingly tender. That you're mine? Isolde's eyes flew open. She whirled to face him, and the breath left her lungs. He was close. Too close. His gray eyes burned with something fierce and unwavering, and in them she saw her own reflection, wild and terrified and small. But she also saw something else. Something that looked like hope, like certainty. Like a man who had already made a decision and would burn the world down before he changed his mind. Don't say that. The words came out as a hiss. I can't be seen with you, don't you understand? They'll destroy me. Your nobles, your court, They won't touch you. You can't promise that. I can. He stepped closer, and the bond between them sang, bright and golden and almost visible in the candlelight. It wrapped around them both, pulling them together like gravity, like fate, like something ancient and inevitable. I will. Isolde shook her head frantically, backing away. Her spine hit something solid. Another pillar. Trapped between cold marble and the heat radiating from the king's body, she felt tears prick at her eyes. This isn't a game to me, she breathed. I'm not some court lady who can weather a scandal and retreat to her country estate. I have nothing, Damien. No family name to protect me. No wealth to buy silence. No powerful relatives who'll demand justice if something happens to me. Her voice cracked. If they decide I'm a threat, you're not a threat. His hand rose to cup her face, and despite everything, she leaned into his touch like a flower turning toward the sun. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You're the only real thing in this entire frozen court. Her eyes stung. That doesn't change what they'll do to me. It changes everything. He leaned down, his forehead nearly touching hers, and his voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her. Do you think I don't know what happens to women who catch the attention of powerful men? Do you think I haven't seen it? My own mother was destroyed by exactly the kind of cruelty you're afraid of. Isolde's breath caught. I was 7, Damien continued, his voice rough with old pain. When they drove her from court with their whispers and their schemes. She was a seamstress's daughter, did you know that? Common blood, they called it. Not worthy of the Alpha King's attention. His jaw tightened. She died 3 years later, alone and heartbroken, because my father was too weak to protect her. too afraid of what his nobles would think, too willing to sacrifice her to keep the peace. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. It tells me you want more stories like this. Isolde's heart ached. Damien, I am not my father. The words came out like iron. I will not hide you in shadows. I will not pretend you don't exist. I will not let them treat you as something shameful when you are the only thing in this kingdom worth protecting. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You barely know me. I know that you bring bread to the stable boys when the head cook isn't looking, even though it means you go hungry some nights. I know you sing to the horses when you think no one can hear, and your voice sounds like summer rain. I know that you risked your position to report Lord Carveth's cruelty to his servants, even though no one believed you, even though everyone told you to stay quiet and stay safe. His thumb brushed away her tears with impossible gentleness. I know that when you look at me, you don't see the crown. You see me. Just me. And I have been waiting my entire life for someone to look at me that way. The hall had gone absolutely silent. Isolde could feel hundreds of eyes on them, could sense the scandal building like a storm about to break. Lady Morwen would dismiss her by morning. The other servants would look at her with pity or contempt. The nobles would sharpen their tongues and go to work dismantling whatever future she might have had. Please, she whispered one last time. Just let me disappear. Damien's expression shifted. Something resolved in his eyes, a decision made and steel forged. No. He took her hand. And then, before she could process what was happening, he was pulling her forward, away from the pillar, away from the shadows, directly into the center of the grand hall, directly into the spotlight. Damien! She stumbled after him, her heart in her throat. What are you? He stopped in the exact center of the dance floor, where every eye in the kingdom could see them, where the light was brightest and there was nowhere to hide. The candles seemed to burn brighter here, the chandeliers casting them both in gold, and Isolde felt like she was standing on a stage before an audience that wanted to watch her fall. Too late, he said softly, and there was something almost like triumph in his voice. I should have done this weeks ago. Done what? Isolde's voice had risen to something embarrassingly close to panic. Publicly humiliated me? Painted a target on my back? Made you untouchable. She stared at him. Damien turned to face the crowd, his hand still wrapped firmly around hers, warm and steady and sure. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the hall, with the authority of a king who had never once questioned his own power. My lords and ladies, honored guests, I have an announcement. Isolde tried to pull away. His grip tightened, gentle but immovable. For 300 years, the alpha kings of this realm have chosen their mates from among the noble houses. It is tradition. It is expected. It is the way things have always been done. His voice dropped, turning dangerous. It is over. A murmur rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Isolde saw shock on some faces, calculation on others, and undisguised fury on a few. The woman beside me, Damien continued, is Isolde Castellan, daughter of Mira Castellan, head of the palace kitchens, and Marcus Castellan, who died defending our northern border during the Frost Wars. Isolde's breath caught. She hadn't known he knew about her father, hadn't known anyone remembered a soldier who'd fallen 15 years ago in a conflict most people had already forgotten. Her father saved 40 men during the siege of Thornwall. He held the gate alone for an hour while his company retreated to safety. He was awarded the Silver Shield posthumously, though the medal was lost before it could reach his family. Damien's voice softened. I found it, 3 days ago, in the records vault. It's waiting for her now. Tears blurred Isolde's vision. She is brave. She is kind. She is more honest than anyone in this room, myself included. She sees through the masks we all wear and still chooses compassion over cruelty. Damien's thumb traced circles against her palm. and she is my mate, my chosen, my queen. The silence that followed was deafening. Then someone laughed. Lord Carveth, Isolde realized with a sinking stomach. The same man whose cruelty she'd reported, whose servants bore scars from his temper, whose last mistress had ended up in the river. He stood near the front of the crowd, his face twisted with amusement. A kitchen girl? His voice dripped with contempt. Your Majesty, surely this is a jest. The bloodlines of the Alpha Kings stretch back to the gods themselves. You cannot pollute that legacy with common filth. Careful. Damien's voice had gone quiet. Deadly. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. The next word out of your mouth may be your last. Carveth's laughter died in his throat. Did you think I wouldn't learn what you've done? Damien released Isolde's hand, and she immediately missed his warmth. He stalked toward Carveth with the lethal grace of a predator. The servants you've brutalized, the women you've terrorized, the bribes you've paid to keep your crimes hidden, the girl who drowned in the river because she knew too much. The color drained from Carveth's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Then let me refresh your memory. Damien stopped directly in front of the Lord, and even from 20 feet away Isolde could see Carveth trembling. 3 months ago, a girl named Sarah came to the palace with evidence of your abuses. She was dismissed, discredited, sent away with nothing. The guards at the gate said she was hysterical, that she was making things up for attention. Damien's voice hardened. They were wrong, and they've already been dealt with. Isolde's heart stopped. I listened to every word of her testimony. Damien continued. I've spent the last 3 months gathering evidence that will see you stripped of your lands, your titles, and your freedom. Did you think I wouldn't notice what was happening in my own kingdom? Did you think I was as blind as my father? Carveth's face contorted with rage. You can't. I'm the Alpha King. Damien smiled, and it was terrifying. I can do whatever I want. Guards. 2 soldiers in royal armor stepped forward. Carveth's eyes went wide with panic as they seized his arms. Lord Carveth will be taken to the tower to await trial, Damien announced, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. His lands are hereby seized by the crown. His servants will be freed and compensated, and anyone who knew of his crimes and stayed silent should consider this their only warning. The guards dragged Carveth away, his protests echoing off the marble walls. Damien turned back to Isolde, and the fury in his expression melted into something soft, tender. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and took her hands again. I'm sorry, he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. I should have asked you first, should have given you a choice, but I couldn't watch you hide anymore. Not when you deserve to stand in the light. Isolde's throat was too tight for words. She looked up at him, at this impossible man who had just upended his entire kingdom for her, and felt something crack open in her chest. Something she'd kept locked away for years, armored against hope, shielded against disappointment. You terrify me, she whispered. I know. He lifted her hand to his lips. But you terrify me too. Every time you pull away. Every time you look at me like I'm going to hurt you. Every time you try to convince yourself that what's between us isn't real. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles. I've never been more scared of anything in my life. Around them, the court remained frozen. Isolde could feel the weight of their judgment, their shock, their calculating assessment of this new political landscape. Some faces showed grudging respect. Others showed barely concealed hatred. But everyone was watching, and for the first time, Isolde didn't want to run. I'm not going to survive this, she said quietly. You will. His eyes burned into hers. Because I'm going to spend every moment of every day making sure of it. And because you're stronger than you know. Stronger than any of them. She wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly that her whole body ached with it. What happens now? Now? Damien glanced at the crowd, then back at her. A small smile curved his lips. Now we dance. Let them watch. Let them talk. Let them learn exactly what kind of queen their kingdom is about to gain. He pulled her into his arms before she could protest, one hand settling warm and sure against the small of her back, the other clasping her fingers. The musicians, apparently deciding that the king's actions were all the instruction they needed, struck up a waltz. Isolde had never learned to dance. Not properly. The few times she'd practiced had been alone in the servants' quarters, humming to herself and stumbling over her own feet. But Damien led her like she was made of moonlight, like they'd been doing this for years, like their bodies knew a rhythm their minds were only beginning to understand. The bond between them hummed with something warm and golden, guiding her steps, steadying her balance. They're going to try to destroy me, she said as they swept across the floor. Yes. Your nobles will fight this. They'll scheme and plot and... Also yes. And you're just fine with that? Damien spun her out, then pulled her back against his chest. His lips brushed her ear, and his voice was rough with emotion. I'm the Alpha King, Isolde. I've been fighting schemes and plots since I was old enough to walk. The difference now is that I finally have something worth fighting for. Her heart stumbled in her chest. What if I'm not strong enough? The fear she'd been swallowing all night finally spilled out. What if they break me? What if I disappoint you? What if... Then I'll be there to help you stand back up. He pulled back to look at her, his gray eyes fierce with conviction. You're not alone in this. Not anymore. Whatever comes, we face it together. The music swelled, and Isolde felt something shift inside her. Something that had been locked away for years, armored against hope, shielded against disappointment, finally cracking open. Maybe she couldn't survive this. Maybe the court would chew her up and spit her out, and everything Damien believed about her would prove to be wishful thinking. But maybe, just maybe, she could try. Together, she whispered. Damien's smile was like the sunrise. When the dance ended, he didn't release her. Instead, he turned to face the watching crowd, his hand firmly wrapped around hers, and spoke with the authority of centuries of royal blood. Let it be known throughout the realm that Isolde Castellan is to be treated with the same respect afforded to myself. Any insult to her is an insult to the crown. Any harm done to her will be answered with the full force of royal justice. His voice hardened. And any member of this court who conspires against her will find themselves stripped of their titles and exiled from these lands. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, like dominoes falling, the nobles began to bow. Some with genuine deference, others with barely concealed resentment. But they all bowed. And Isolde, standing in the spotlight she'd been so desperate to avoid, felt the first fragile stirring of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. The weeks that followed were a battlefield of a different kind. Isolde learned to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics with Damien at her side. She learned which nobles could be trusted and which smiled while sharpening knives behind their backs. She learned that power was not just about strength, but about perception, and that every word she spoke would be weighed and measured by people looking for weaknesses. But she also learned that she was stronger than she'd ever believed. That the same stubbornness that had kept her alive in the servants' quarters served her well in council chambers. That her understanding of ordinary people, of their struggles and hopes, gave her insights that nobles who'd never worked a day in their lives could never possess. And through it all, Damien was there, in meetings that stretched past midnight, his hand finding hers beneath the table. In moments of doubt, his voice steady and certain. In the darkest hours, when the weight of her new life threatened to crush her, his arms wrapped around her like armor against the world. 2 months later, Isolde stood on the balcony of the Queen's chambers, watching the sun rise over mountains she'd only ever seen from the servants' quarters. The view was different from up here, bigger, more beautiful. The snow on the peaks glowed pink and gold, and the forests below were a carpet of green stretching to the horizon, more terrifying. "You're thinking too loudly." She smiled as warm arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her back against a broad chest. Damien's chin came to rest on top of her head, his breath stirring her hair. "How can you tell?" "The bond." His voice was rough with sleep. "It hums differently when you're worried, like a harp string pulled too tight." She turned in his arms, tilting her face up to look at him. The crown prince of sleepy dishevelment, his dark hair sticking up in 3 different directions, his gray eyes soft and unguarded in the morning light. No armor, no crown, just him. "Lady Weston is still plotting," Isolde said. "I heard her whispering with Lord Harmon yesterday. Something about proving my blood isn't pure enough for the ceremonies." "I know. And the northern delegates are unhappy about the trade negotiations. They think you're distracted." "I know that too. And there's a faction of the old guard who think you've lost your mind, choosing a kitchen girl over the daughters of noble houses." Damien's lips curved. "Definitely aware of that one." Isolde frowned at him. "You're not concerned?" "Concerned?" He pulled her closer, his hands sliding warm and sure along her spine. "No. Lady Weston's conspiracy fell apart last week when her co-conspirators realized I'd already offered them better terms for their loyalty. The northern delegates will come around once they see the new trade routes I'm proposing. And the old guard..." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "The old guard can rot, for all I care." "Damien." "What?" "They're the same people who let my mother suffer, who stood by while Carveth brutalized his servants for years, who care more about bloodlines than kindness." His jaw tightened. "The realm needs new blood, new ideas. A queen who knows what it's like to work for a living, who understands the struggles of ordinary people." His eyes softened. "It needs you." Isolde's chest ached with emotion. Even after 2 months of this, of waking up beside him, of learning the language of his body and the landscape of his heart, she still couldn't quite believe it was real. "I burned 3 loaves of bread yesterday," she confessed. "Just completely ruined them. Cook Helena had to remake them from scratch." Damien blinked. "Why were you baking bread?" "I missed it." She felt heat creep up her cheeks. The smell of the kitchens, the rhythm of the work, the way the dough feels when you're kneading it. She bit her lip. "I know queens aren't supposed to. Queens are supposed to do whatever makes them happy." Damien's voice was firm. "If that means baking bread, then we'll build you the finest kitchen in the realm, white marble counters, windows overlooking the gardens. Whatever you want. You can't just solve every problem by building something. Watch me." She laughed, and he caught the sound with his lips, kissing her soft and slow until she forgot why she'd been worried in the first place. The bond between them hummed with contentment, warm and golden and steady. It had grown stronger over the past 2 months, weaving through their souls until she couldn't remember what it had felt like to be without it. When they finally broke apart, the sun had fully risen, painting the mountains gold and rose. Isolde leaned against Damien's chest, listening to the steady drum of his heart. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Choosing me? All the trouble it's caused?" Damien was silent for a long moment. Then his arms tightened around her, and he spoke with the same quiet intensity he'd had that night in the grand hall. "I regret every moment I spent before I found you. Every day I wasted being the king they wanted me to be, instead of the man I wanted to become." He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're not trouble, Isolde. You're the best thing that ever happened to this kingdom. To me. And I would burn it all down and build it again from ashes if that's what it took to keep you safe." Her eyes burned with tears she'd stopped trying to hide around him. "I love you," she whispered. The words still felt new on her tongue, still felt dangerous and wonderful and impossible. Damien smiled, and it was the sunrise all over again. "I know," he said. "I've known since the first night in the garden, when you told me my crown was crooked and I should fix it before someone thought I couldn't dress myself." Isolde groaned, burying her face in his chest. "I didn't know you were the king." "I know. That's why I fell in love with you." He pressed another kiss to her hair. "Everyone else treats me like I'm made of glass and gold. You treated me like a person, like someone who could be wrong, who could be challenged, who needed to hear the truth even when it was uncomfortable. I was terrified when I found out." "I know that too." His voice turned rueful. "You avoided me for 3 days. I thought I'd lost you before I ever really had you." Isolde pulled back to look at him. "I was trying to protect myself, trying to protect both of us. I knew what would happen if anyone found out." And now? She thought about the last 2 months. The battles they'd fought together, the victories they'd won, the nights spent wrapped in each other's arms, whispering secrets and fears and dreams they'd never shared with anyone else. "Now," she said slowly, "I think maybe being seen isn't the worst thing in the world. Not if you're standing beside me." Damien's smile softened into something achingly tender. "Always. For the rest of our lives. And whatever comes after. I promise you that." He kissed her then, deep and sure and full of promise. And when they finally broke apart, Isolde looked out at the kingdom spread beneath them, the kingdom that would one day call her queen, and felt the last of her fear dissolve like morning mist. She'd spent so long hiding in shadows, convinced that the light would burn her. But here, in the arms of a man who saw her exactly as she was and loved her anyway, she finally understood. Some things were worth being seen for. Some people were worth stepping into the spotlight. And this love, this impossible, terrifying, beautiful love, was worth every battle yet to come. "Come on," Damien murmured against her lips. "The council meeting starts in an hour, and I promised Helena you'd test her new honey cakes before they're served at the luncheon." Isolde laughed. The queen, taste-testing pastries. The queen, doing whatever she wants. He grinned and pulled her toward the door. "It's one of the perks of the crown." She followed him, her hand warm in his, her heart full to bursting. The crown on her finger caught the morning light, the simple band of twisted silver that Damien had given her the night he'd asked her to be his queen. Not a command, a question. Always a question with him, even when he had the power to demand. Some stories ended with a happily ever after. Theirs was just beginning. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.